everybody. This is Craig from the Pacific War Channel. Welcome back to Echoes of War. Joined here by my co-host Gaurav. How are you?
Hey Greg, great to be back here, and I'm really excited for this episode. I'm a fanboy for the protagonist. I'll just leave it at that.
I certainly know you are. Before we jump into it, I just want to remind everybody that if you're not checking us out on YouTube, please do so, as we put a lot of work into getting all of the maps, portraits, and clips up here to try and make it more of a kind of documentary-like feeling. And to be honest, just have a better reach on YouTube. You can find bigger audiences and that. And I really want to make a good home for Echoes of War on the YouTube platform. And we have an associated clips channel, which breaks down multiple episodes we have into kind of 10-minute little clips. And if you're someone with a shorter attention span, well, that might be up to, your game. So go check out Echoes of War Clips channel if you want. And if you'd like to further support us, please consider checking out the YouTube membership on the Pacific War channel or my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War channel. By joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series. You get early access to all the content I make and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. And I think I'm going to say it here. This might mean nothing to a bunch of people, but I noticed that there was nearly 100 people who were free members on my Patreon. Patreon apparently just didn't, something glitched out, and yeah, for a long time a lot of people were just getting my stuff for free. And I only found out recently, and because all this money is going to two animators that I currently employ, and I lose hundreds of dollars on every episode they animate because it's very expensive, I had to make sure that, yeah, you do have to become a paid member to get access to things like the exclusive podcast. But I mean, it's $2 or more, or if you want the other tiers, there's also other goodies. So please, if you're a free member, go you still want access to all that, yeah, just go check it out and see if you can even get a discount if you want to upgrade your package and also all that.
And maybe consider joining the Discord. Greg and I
Yeah,
like to engage with you guys there, so definitely look
yeah,
forward
it's
to
true.
that.
I don't talk about the Discord enough, and there's actually a small group of guys who are talking there all the time, and it's interesting to say the least. It's going to quickly become a cesspool, I'm sure, of like some of the worst in history, politics, and such.
You
But
mean
join it.
Discord?
Yeah, exactly. So all of you guys, if you like, even if you're coming from, the podcasts I do for Kings and Generals and such, yeah, please, Pacific War week by week guys, Eastern Front week by week guys, or the Fall and Rise of China guys, come over. You can talk to me about the podcast. I answer all the questions, and it's like nearly every day I'm on there just talking to people. Yeah, come bother us. But stating all of that, Gaurav, please take me hostage and talk about the subject we're hitting today.
Yeah. So this thing, as the title will say, is not gonna be a military focused episode. Kind of rare for us to do that, but we definitely want to get into this, talk about the political and logistic sides. But this is the first consulship of Gaius Julius Caesar, and this was in the year 59 BC when he formed the first triumvirate with Pompey and Crassus. And it was quite an eventful year and set of build-ups, but given the state of dysfunction that existed in the Roman Republic at that time, not completely surprising, but I love this year. It was a lot
And
of fun for me.
of course, the primary reason for the first triumvirate was Julius Caesar trying to escape loan sharks.
The guy was broke most of his life.
Yeah.
All right. Now, before we get into the details of Caesar's consulship in particular, I want to take some time and explain Roman elections and Roman politics in terms of the structure of the Senate, because it is really important, because there are quite a bit of nuances that take place, and you can try to see the political maneuvering done by Caesar and his faction and his opponents. So setting that context is, I think, pretty important. So just give me a second. I need to bring up the screen. Now, the Romans had a pretty rigid system in terms of the voting. Now, the Comitia Centurata, or the Centurion Committee, they are the ones that elect the consuls. All right. And how they were assessed was in various voting blocks, as you can see on this image. And, they would be, convened outside the camp of Campus Martius, the camp of Mars outside of Rome. People were assigned to these blocks based on their wealth, their family as a percentage of the population from where they come from, and kind of relations to the various tribes. And this was the work done by the censors of Rome, which is a very prominent position in the Roman Senate. But obviously, it does not have any real power, but it's just a power. It's a respectful position. Now, the people are then also divided into blocks within these particular centuries, which is basis on their age and their class and occupation, right? And the number of these blocks never changed. So, because of that, it kind of became a very top heavy system where the older and wealthier citizens were the ones who could, vote. So, when a consul would summon the people for the elections of the upcoming consuls, the 18 equestrian centuries, which you see at the top here, are the first ones who are going to be voting. And then it would be a junior class and such. And then this was very important that after these 18 voted, because with them and some of the first classes, if a consular candidate tended to get the majority of the vote, he's practically assured of getting the consulship. It's actually a very good chance that if you got most of the votes, if you were like part of, say, the third or fourth class, rarely even the fifth class would even vote. You wouldn't even be voting if these guys at the top, in the the top tiers of the first class and the equities, all decided that, hey, this guy needs to be the consul. Yeah, that's it. If they agreed, then the lower classes will not be done. So it's kind of like, basis the first century voting, it tends to form a very good barometer on who is going to be the one of the two consuls. So this is just how the voting happened. It was really kind of weird because not everyone is going to get a vote, not every vote is equal, but that was just how the system was. Now, if you want to be a candidate for election, the Roman system was very rigid. Within this system, one second, I'm just going to bring up, the Senate of Rome had a path called the cursus honorum, which is the life of a politician in Rome. And within this, just give me a second. I have so many tabs open.
Yeah, for those who don't watch us on YouTube, basically we have like our Google Chrome is just 20 tabs of photos and maps and such.
Yeah. So, as you can see, this is just a very simplified view of the path of any person that wants to aspire to be up in the Roman. I think this is just a bit more better of how Roman society was structured. Most of the people are in the bottom three, like the plebeians, the ordinary folks, and the slaves, right? That's where like the 99% are. These guys are the top. And you will have every year 20 quaestors elected, 16 aediles, 8 praetors, and 2 consuls. And the rest of the members will be serving in the Senate, which was 300 and later expanded to 600 and then later reduced back to 300 by Sulla. But if you were elected into a magistrate position, and as long as the censor did not reject you, you would be serving in the Senate for life. And because of the Roman legacy system, most patricians were just expected to serve in the Senate for their entire life. So that's why, for example, like the Scipio family, many generations of them. Even Caesar's family, the Julii, were an ancient patrician family that fell out of favor but had a seat in the Senate just because of this, you know, legacy system that existed. Now, here you can see there are the various roles, and according to Polybius, right, he's our famous historian who hated Hannibal and wrote the histories in the second century BC. Candidates have to have at least 10 years of military service. Now, this is not really a hard and fast rule, but it was generally preferred and completely ignored in the late Republic. Because keep in mind, to ancient Romans, a politician in general, it's practically the same thing. All of these guys have served in the past. Scipio had so many years of service as a military tribune. And, you know, the candidates will start off below this, below the quaestor, as a military tribune. So you'll be accompanying a legate who is a very senior senator. That is, he would be at least a praetor on campaign and serving as an aide and leading soldiers into battle. Once you reach the age of 30, right, which is Salah reverting back to the ancient Roman laws, you are eligible to serve as a quaestor. By then, you've completed your 10 years of service. And quaestors are these guys who will just do the various basic administrative work for the Senate for that year. So they'll be managing the finances and records and such. The next was kind of going to the edile route, which was not official in the sense you could bypass it and just wait for eligibility to go to the praetor. But ediles, you are going to go very broke. But it is where you host temple, like host festivals, maintain the temples, and you can host banquets and all, improving your popularity with the masses. It does help you for your future career, but it's pretty costly, but not necessary. But you had to be, I think, around 34 years old to be eligible to stand for edile. And the next was the praetorship at the age of 39, where you serve as a judge. So it's primarily a judicial duty, and in times of war you will be given command of legions if there were multiple legions in the field. Ex praetors at least will be given a a legate during command. And after you served as a praetor, you are given one of the more tame provinces, you could call it, within Rome to govern for a year. That is your propraetorship, and you have complete authority and jurisdiction of all forces and Romans within that region. And that's just basically your ticket to becoming uh, avoiding bankruptcy. And at the age of 42, it's the top position of the consul. Consul is what you could say is the president prime minister of the Roman Republic. There were two because the Romans really feared the power of one guy. So it was kind of like
which,
strange.
which was actually very common in the ancient world. If you look back at Sparta, their system of two kings, which was more for
True enough.
military reasons. So like one can be on campaign, one can be at home, kind of thing.
Yeah, but the Romans were put this in particular when they drafted their Senate after the driving away of the last king of Rome in 509 BC was just to avoid the concentration.
Yeah,
However,
of course,
it because you hold power for just a year, it causes these guys to go pretty crazy. The
radical.
reason
Yeah,
yeah, you have to be a very aggressive personality, very ambitious, and willing to engage in bribery and such to get to the top. It's cutthroat. Very few people most would even reach to the praetorship, let alone the consulship. Most senators just finish at the quaestor level. And after your consulship, you get a proconsulship where you govern a province, and this is given to the more lucrative or frontier provinces where the opportunity to extort the people, I'm not even going to say govern the people, it's extortion there, and go on military campaigns against the enemies of Rome to get more glory, money, and plunder. That's pretty much your entire 20-25 year political career being recovered in a year. And I might also add, propraetors, when you're serving as a magistrate, you're a consul, you're a praetor, edile, and quaestor, or you are governing a province as a propraetor or proconsul. You also have the imperium, which means you're exempt from law. So the laws of Rome don't avoid for you, and keep that in mind because that is the reason Caesar pretty much declares war on Rome later. But this was the situation for Rome in terms of its senate and structure and how it is voted. Now let's get back to our hero of the episode, guys, Julius Caesar. I'm not going to talk about his early life and fleeing from Sulla or the pirates, even though what he did with the pirates was pretty amazing. I'm going to be talking about what he did from 63 BC onwards. So he's now 37 years old. He stands for the praetorship, and also in that year becomes the Pontifex Maximus. That is the head priest of Rome. This is pretty important. It's not, it's a post that you can also kind of win in terms of an election when it's available. Unlike the magistrate offices of the Senate, you are not going to get you don't have to surrender it after a specified amount of time. It's yours till death, or till you get voted out or exiled or such. Now, Caesar made quite a name for himself. He bribed a lot of people and conducted judicial proceedings pretty aggressively. And even though people alleged that there was like in a lot of bribery, it wasn't enough to even convict him. And some are even suggesting at this time itself, 63 BC, Pompey has underwritten Caesar's bribes for his praetorship, because Caesar was standing in contention against Quintus Lutatius Catullus, who Pompey personally hated. So, one of the best things of Roman politics, just how much they dislike each other as well. Now, after the praetorship, Caesar is given to gets to govern the province of Hispania Ulterior. Now, this is where you know he starts his military campaign. Now, it's nothing like extravagant or such. Even though he has the veteran seventh, eighth, ninth, and 10th legions there, which will later be given to him, he has to not only extort the people for his bribes that he paid out right during his elections to get elected as aedile, the expenses, and then for the Pontifex Maximus and such. He also gained some military glory against the Lusitani and the Calesi tribes, and he subjugated them. And he also got the Roman troops to the Atlantic coast. So he plundered this region enough that he could pay off all his debts. So, yes, Caesar's no longer bankrupt. Now, he then was acclaimed as imperator by his soldiers, and in summer of 60 BC, he heads home. He's now 40 years old. Now, this is where we see some of the shenanigans of politics coming into play. Caesar, while he was um, campaigning in Hispania, is able to get a special dispensation that will allow him to run for the position of consul 2 years before his eligibility. He's 40 years old. He cannot run for it yet. He has to be 42. In the past, when you broke this rule of the consulship, it generally was during emergency wars and such, right? Like during the Cimbrian War, Second Punic War, where these requirements would largely now this kind of like was granted to him, which kind of shows how the Roman Senate is starting to break down the if you're just gonna give a guy who at this point has not really achieved much in his career this dispensation. And he now comes and stands outside the city of Rome. So he is outside the boundaries of Rome, because his soldiers have acclaimed him as imperator, which is a great title and honor, and he was granted a triumph. This is a massive honor that any general can have. But here's the catch. He cannot enter the city of Rome as an active general. The black Pomeranian line that we can see here, you're not allowed to cross it if you're an active serving general. You will be allowed to enter on the day of your triumph. Now, this is really important, because uh, the conservative bloc, the optimates, or the people who were opposed to any radical reforms that Caesar and the popular faction of the masses were doing, which is led by Cato the Younger, they did not they realized they need to sabotage Caesar, because ultimately what he does is sabotaging him. He pushes back he pushes back Caesar's triumph march after the deadline for the declaration of the candidacy for the consulship. Now, Caesar's caught in a pretty brutal bind. Refusing a triumph is a major decision to make, because triumphs are not just awarded like later how Augustus and some of the Roman emperors would do. It was a matter of great prestige. But if he wants to, because the Senate also grumbled and got pissed off with him when he requested to be declaring his candidacy in absentia. Now, if they did not want to let him run for consulship and do this, why did they even grant him that dispensation that he can legally stand for the consular elections this year, 2 years before his eligible time. Right? It's pretty much obvious what is going on over here. Caesar makes the pretty brutal choice. I mean, I won't call it brutal, but personally, it's pretty brutal and difficult. Is he renounces his army command, so he is now a private citizen. He crosses into the city, goes to the forum, and on time declares his candidacy, which I'm pretty sure pissed off Cato to no end because he thought Caesar would probably not do it. And this is at around this time, the late 60 BC, and a group of Roman senators came together. We know them today as the First Triumvirate. Greg, would you like to maybe talk a little bit of its other members and what they had been doing in the build up to 60 BC and whatever their achievements and I'll call them grievances they have with the Senate?
Sure. So let's start off with the most well-known one, Pompey, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, also as most who know this history would know him as Pompey the Great, who rose to prominence in the later half of the Roman Republic through, an extensive history of high-profile military and political achievements that, as we're going to see in the future, lay to the kind of the groundwork of an alliance with Julius Caesar. But I want to focus on his career before Julius Caesar's, consulship and such. Like, where did he come from? So his early career and his family's background. Pompey hailed from a patrician, political leaning background, and he had senatorial circles running through a lot of his family, and he aligned himself with the popular through his, military promises and his populist-like policies. He secured powerful patronage networks, leveraging,
You mean you mean Sulla?
Yes, Sulla, exactly. His background with Sulla, of course, alongside other senior generals, legacies shifting. He comes for a better part of his life. He's undergoing a tumultuous period, which was the Sullan era, which, for both military and political reasons, was chaotic, to say the least. His first major command was during the Italian campaigns, where that was his initial rise, as you could see it. And during this, he aligned with the Optimate faction, and he earned something akin to what people would envision as a Caesar-like commander status. He was very popular. He demonstrated decisive leadership in multiple theaters, notably when he was suppressing slave revolts and such, especially in the Mediterranean theater, where he went against the pirates.
You mean when he took all the credit from Crassus in the Third Servile
Yeah,
War?
well, we're gonna get to Crassus, but of course, they all brush shoulders in all of these things. His
I would
rapid
just want to add a little thing is
yeah,
he learned from his mistakes as well. One of his early commands was in the Sertorian War against one of Marius's loyalists, Quintus Sertorius. And that guy was, I'll even say it's right now, one of the most underappreciated Roman generals. And there was this Battle of Lauron, which is in Valentina near the city of Sucro today. He engages Pompey with 20 to 30,000 men against a similar, slightly larger force. And he lost just a few hundred men, inflicting over 10,000 casualties on Pompey. It was a massive defeat
impressive.
for Pompey.
Yeah.
But Pompey learned, and then he actually began to use political subterfuge to kind of get Sertorius removed from power and later killed. And his subordinates were absolutely useless in comparison to Sertorius.
Again, we've already mentioned this in previous episodes. It's a unique time in history because these generals also have to be politicians. It's almost like a 50-50 balance. You could argue in World War II, there were key characters who had a similar style, like Eisenhower and stuff. But it was crucial for these guys in the ancient world. They had to both fight in the political arena and militarily.
There was no distinction to the masses between a general and politician. It was practically the same.
And it definitely shows who is capable of achieving certain statuses and who can receive certain posts, because you have to be good in both fields. It's very interesting, and it's something people have to be reminded of. He had other campaigns, of course. He extended Roman influence in the east, places like Syria and such, and he definitely earned himself, in the list of the top commanders that Rome's ever seen. His campaigns consolidated Roman control over, the eastern provinces. He had to coordinate large amounts of forces, as well as oversee, all the provinces and such. He cultivated auctoritas, so personal prestige through victories by extending, Roman power where he went, expanding his personal client base as well, because you're networking as a general and a politician. His success abroad translated into domestic leveraging, enabling him to exert a lot of influence over, Senate decisions and the public opinion. Even though politically he wasn't that great of a speaker, was he? He's he was
But
better on the field of battle.
he was a great administrator. Like the way he reformed the East was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It was said that after his organization of the eastern provinces, after his victory at the Third Mithridatic War, the annual state income went up from 200 million to 340 million sesterces, with an additional one-time payment of 480 million.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he was loyal. He paid his troops pretty well. The forces after the Third Mithridatic War, their bonuses was an amount equal to 16,000 talents, which is a lot.
Yeah. But by the time, Caesar's rising up for the consulship, Pompey, he's already been established as, like, maybe you would say the greatest military leader that Rome has at that time. And he's renowned for his ability to, actually, it's probably people working for him, to orchestrate like his propaganda campaigns to, increase his image. And like you said, securing rewards for his veterans, which is important because you want to retain loyalty over these troops. His name alone could mobilize troops, and it does. Historically, I mean,
In the
he is
Civil
the
War.
guy that faces Caesar. And
Yeah.
it should be noted, he's much older than Julius Caesar. They're generations apart, you would say. I mean, I forget how old he was compared to Caesar. 20? Is it
No,
20
no,
years
no.
older?
Much, not as older. 6 years older.
Oh, I thought it was significantly more. Because people believe that because of
He's
his
had a
age,
younger start to military experience compared to Caesar. So I guess that really works in his favor
because
compared to.
the sources indicate that he wasn't as good of a military commander when they do face off in the later years against each
I
other, that he kind of weaned
I used
off.
to believe that, but I think he was a better guy than these sources give him credit for. And the problem he has right now with the Senate, despite him getting a triumph after his victories in the East, they have not ratified his treaties and reorganization he's done for the Senate. And they've not given him the land and money to discharge his veterans. This is, and you're talking about at this moment in time, he is the god of Roman generals, like
And I
amongst
guess
the living.
we'll hit up Mr. Crassus.
Mr. Fire Brigade, you mean?
Yes, Marcus Licinius Crassus. So the third chief here, known as, of course, as, if anyone knows anything about him, they know he was Rome's richest and most influential man in his day. And he built a career that combined wealth, political ambition, the words ambition, and military influence. His path before Caesar's consulship was characterized by, shrewd accumulations of power, strategic alliances, and a willingness to leverage wealth to shape Roman politics. He hailed from a patrician turned plebeian family, and he, grew up during a time when there was many reforms. He aligned with the popular through opportunistic networks. He capitalized on his family's property holdings and speculative investments, amassing an amazing amount of wealth that would later fund political campaigns and military ventures. For those who don't know,
And not a
in
mention of Caesar or any loyalist of his, because he would be financing the campaigns so that anyone who is financed by him, they owe him a personal debt of gratitude.
yeah, patronage system. For anything to happen in Rome, you needed money. But what's, I think, surprising for general audience members is something that they have to kind of understand. The thing that everyone is vying for in this time period isn't money. They want to get the money to be able to get this prestige, to be able to do these military
Office.
campaigns, higher office, to hold Imperium, like you were mentioning before. It's like that is actually the key. That's the big thing that everyone wants. Like today, everyone wants to be a YouTube influencer. Oh, look at me. You want to be a YouTube influencer, want to be famous and such. For them back then, it was this sense of power within the empire. And money was a part of it, but it wasn't the end result that people were looking for. It was a means to get there. So I always
Can I just
find.
say that his fire brigade tactic was so brutal, and he would actually buy the house,
Do you want to explain it?
rebuild.
Like, you want to talk about, because it is a funny story. What did he do with the fire brigade? Explain it.
Yeah, Crassus had the first uh, fire brigade of Rome, right? And he financed this through his rewards from Sulla in the previous years because he did play a key role in allowing Sulla to take power. So, one, he bought a lot of fancy estates at undervalued uh, prices because of the proscriptions that Sulla put on Marius and his supporters. So, he capitalized on that. So that was one thing. Then what he did was, the fire brigade, where he would have a, group of slaves who would be there, and they will be fires, and then they will go there, and then they will negotiate with the homeowner for how much they have to pay Crassus's fire brigade of about 500 people, and they have to agree on a price to either buy the house or get the services done. And if not, they're just going to be like, okay, we'll just watch your house burn. And fires was actually a pretty big problem in the city at this time.
Hey guys, this is Craig from the Pacific War Channel. Please don't forget to check out my YouTube membership or my Patreon account over at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel, where you can join the ranks and gain access to a hell of a lot of goodies. At the base minimum, you get access to the exclusive monthly podcast, early access to all of my content, voting rights for what subjects I will tackle next, and at higher tiers, I have much more goodies to come. So please click that link and check it out.
And because he's like, you're going to lose this house, so I'm going to buy it for you, but maybe it's like buying it at a very cheap price of what it was actually worth.
Yeah.
And if the guy agrees, then Crassus is like, all right, boys, we're going to, he'll have his 500 guys, just douse the fire efficiently and take possession. Then he had another group of 500 slaves who were architects and builders. They would rebuild that same place to a better quality. And he often leased these properties back to the same people he bought it from.
So, for lack of better words, he was exploiting the real estate of Rome and using basically
He was the
this.
most ruthless real estate mogul.
Yeah. If American audience listeners have seen the movie Gangs of New York, it kind of touches upon a similar scene that happened in the early days of New York City, where there was private fire brigades. It's a very similar situation, and they would kind of pick and choose when to save certain parts of the city if it would benefit the owner of the fire brigades real estate investments and stuff. It's a messed up situation that has happened historically in many parts of the world, I'm sure. But yeah, Crassus made a pretty penny doing that.
Yeah,
As
he
you
was the richest person, and even the Pompey, you could say, is the second richest person in Rome right now because of the amount he would have definitely plundered from the east.
Oh yeah,
Because
yeah,
they were pretty
very.
rich kingdoms as well, but Crassus was richer. That just shows how ruthless of a real estate entrepreneur he was. I think
Real
some people
estate
say,
entrepreneur. Yes, of course, that's what he was. Yeah, and
I
like you
think
said,
some
he
people said the very prominent areas of the city, he owned half of it.
probably, and
Now,
his political.
yeah, I was just gonna say why he's in distress with the Senate. He had promised to back out the tax collectors. Now, this is an interesting thing on how Roman collected taxes from the provinces. They did not. They contracted it out to a private company. Said company or group of, I'm not sure company is even the right term, but they will give it to a contractor, for lack of a better term, and they will say, okay, from the province of Hispania Ulterior, or you know Asia Minor, or Syria, Illyrium, whatever, I'll promise to get you 440 million sesterces of tax this year. There were no doubt some safeguards given to basis the income, population, state of the region, how much tax you could actually collect. Now, as you can imagine, in such a case, if you want to get the money paid, you need to get the taxes. You have to bid for the highest contract. You'd say, yeah, like if me and Craig had a bidding war, it'll be, I'll say I'll get 40 million from Illyrium. Craig, you'll say 44 million, and I'll go up to 46. Like that, it would go on. Now, these tax collectors were based in the east, where Pompey actually was fighting wars. Now, because of the devastation, you not only had a loss of manpower, you've also seen a lot of infrastructure destroyed. So these tax collectors cannot meet their obligations. And the Roman Senate did not want to reduce the amount of tax. They said, you bid that you're going to collect this much, we demand that much. And Crassus is fighting for them to have that obligation reduced. So, and this is also where you see some fighting between the two of them. Crassus hated Pompey for the Third Servile War because Crassus kicked Spartacus's ass in battle, but Pompey took the credit. So he opposed Pompey's land reformation, and Pompey kind of like allied with the faction of the Senate that blocked Crassus's own legislation requests.
Hmm.
So
And
that's
just to
where Caesar comes in now. Caesar is this popular guy. He's an amazing orator, pretty active defender, charismatic. The lover of every Roman senator's wife at this time.
yeah.
I remember our previous host for the Greco-Persian War series, Dan. I think he probably would have been in affairs with Crassus's wife by now already, knowing Caesar. Anyways, they come and then they form this alliance to kind of get their three goals to move together, right? Because if they don't, they are in a lot of trouble. So these are our three fellow triumvirs. So in opposition to them, though, there is the conservative bloc. Now, these are the hardcore traditionalists who do not want any radical change. The first guy, Greg, I really dislike this person. It is the guy called Cato the Younger.
The picture you've chosen, Jesus. Okay.
Yeah, he is someone who is truly descended from his father, Cato the Elder. Sorry, grandfather, Cato the Elder.
Yeah, it's a grandfather.
Had a personal vendetta with Caesar because his half sister was Caesar's biggest lover.
Well, that's part of it, but I mean, the other
Yeah,
part
I know.
is, because of his
The politics.
virtues, Caesar runs
Yeah.
in the face of him. Yeah.
Yeah, Caesar was pretty well known for being a womanizer, playing loosely with the rules, which no doubt
Loose robes.
affected Cato. Cato rises to political prominence in 64 BC, and he was assigned to the state treasury. He managed to keep the treasury away from corruption and prosecuted a number of clerks for misusing the funds because no one before him did anything about it. He
Before
enforced debt collection. Yeah.
Before you jump into Cato, maybe do you want me to explain his background, like who he was?
Sure. Yeah, please.
Because I don't, if the audience doesn't know,
I think that'll
he's
be
not
good.
a normal person. Like, I don't know how else to say it. He would be considered abnormal he was considered abnormal for his day. And I do apologize. I had to choose this famous photo of his later in life infamous death by suicide because it is a crazy story. But Cato the Younger, or his actual name was Cato Eutenesis, was a prominent, very, very prominent Roman politician and statesman who was coming about at the same time as Julius Caesar.
Can I just call him the king of filibuster?
Yes, he absolutely was the greatest filibuster of probably all time. He was defined by his staunch republicanism, and by republicanism, what we're saying and what you alluded to is I don't know how else to put this. He believed in a set of virtues that existed hundreds of years before the time he's living. So he basically pretended he was this staunch ancient person who lived by virtues that no one lived by anymore. And that was his entire shtick, as you would say. That's what made him popular. So he lived by these principles that just no one lived by anymore. And he opposed corruption that was his go-to. Anything that was new, he would attack. Any corruption, he would attack. He really saw himself as this champion of an older republic. And that's basically how he kind of rose through the ranks. He just always put this on. He really believed this. From early on, he positioned himself as a defender of mos marium, the ancient customs of the Senate. He championed traditional virtues, frugality, and discipline, presented himself as a counterweight to luxury, wealth accumulation, and the populist movement, which that's Julius Caesar in a nutshell, all of that. Cato leveraged his family pedigree. He descended from a legendary ancestral line. Of course, we're talking about his grandfather, and his own reputation for probity to secure, a meaningful life and all that. He was very combative in the Senate against other people. He liked to fight other people. He cultivated a network amongst the equities and the conservative senatorial factions, and he brushed shoulders with everyone pretty badly on the other side. We'll say that much.
I mean,
He was,
everyone, like even Pompey, even Caesar, even his friends, who one was accused of, like, entering wrong entry so that he could pocket about 4 or 5 talents of money. And he confronted him just before his quaestorship ended. And he was also pretty lucky. Someone like him, who tended to stand on such virtues in the completely broken down times of the late Roman Republic, honestly would not have had success. But since the senatorial elite had been destroyed right through Sulla and Marius' civil war, he was able to get to the top. Now he never really reaches the position of consul. He ends up as a praetor.
but
That
like you
is,
said,
and it's gonna play a role. Why I said that. And
people living in his time would agree that there was like a sense of doom with the Senate, like that Rome was kind of falling apart from its old
yeah,
virtues, we'll say.
yeah, and even guys like Cicero also believe that. The only thing is Cicero was pragmatic enough to know when to stand on morals and when to try to take a pragmatic solution.
Well, Cicero was a politician. Cato actually believed in the juice he was drinking. Like that was the difference between them. Yeah.
True enough.
Cato
But
legitimately believed this shit. Yeah.
true. And one thing is, while we are going to be using the terms of the factions of the Optimates and Populares, there there was no concept of a political party as we know it today, like the Labour
Yeah.
Party at Conservatives of UK, the Democrats and Republicans in US, the Indian Congress, BJP in India. It did not exist. It's just a group of senators who kind of like coalesce around each other because they stand for similar things, or or in this case, I would really say it's more of a common enemy.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good way to
And
put
that
it.
is pretty much how the Optimates and Populares kind of, you know, work together.
And just to end off his little career, what made him famous, you already alluded to, he was the master of the filibuster. So, because he championed a lot of things that didn't want to see change, he wanted to bring Rome back. Let's say if you rewind time, if you want to call it that. He, if anyone tried to like make some reforms, he would just go up and filibuster until like nothing was done. So he was a hurdle to any kind of change in the Senate, really. And yeah, made him
And
quite
I
famous.
think right now the best example I can give in the build up to our Caesar's consulship is actually when the dates for Caesar's triumph. He was a guy who orchestrated, and when debate was supposed to be open on why it, like to accommodate Caesar's request for changing the scheduling so that he can have his triumph, disband his army, and then declare. Cato
Hmm.
filibustered all day for the entire day till the Senate ended its session for the day. He was good at that.
Oh yeah,
I I used to think that this guy, he was a great politician, but then I realized, okay, the guy just filibusters. He's not really passed any great laws.
he's not Cicero. He doesn't have a silver tongue. He lives. He. It's people just respected him simply because he lived this old virtuous lifestyle, and everyone was like, "Oh wow, like it's incredible that he would basically he's like a monk." That's the way that they would look at him. He's this virtuous
True.
monk like guy.
And he's gonna be the biggest opponent for Caesar, along with his son-in-law Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus. Do you have anything to say on
Yeah, I have a little bit because I
this
didn't know much
big
about this
joke of
guy.
a person?
So I am guilty of not knowing too much about this guy because I never paid attention to him whenever he was brought up when I was learning this stuff. Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus was a prominent Roman statesman and consul in the late Republic. But let's look at his career before Julius Caesar's consulship. He came from a patrician Calpurni family. He aligned with the we would call them conservative elements of the senators. He cultivated a reputation for probity, methodical governance, adherence to mos maiorum, the ancestral customs. Of course, he's associated with Cato the Younger, so he'd have to be. He positioned himself as kind of a stabilizing force amid maritime upheavals and a lot of political upheavals of the day. His climb paralleled the shifting alliances in the late 60s and the 50s. He achieved high office through the traditional cursus honorarium, gaining authority within the Senate and among the equities, seeking experienced leadership to counter the populist initiatives. His In his earlier days, he demonstrated some competence in provincial administration and military matters. Also, he commanded some units in the frontiers and rather volatile regions, reinforcing the image of being a capable military leader, which you had to do. Of course, you have to do both sides of this, political and military. He earned a reputation for being quite cautious. He was bound by rules. He took things seriously with Rome, like the virtues and such. He frequently emphasized legality, uh, procedures, that they're done properly, and he did not like the dangers of radical change. So obviously, the populist people, he didn't like them very much. His relationship towards Caesar and Pompey, he's living in a very rapidly changing political landscape. He found himself navigating the ambitions of two very large figures. So it's Julius Caesar, of course, and Pompey the Great. Often in opposition to Caesar's reformist agendas, he remained a key figure in the broader balance of power, leveraging his people that were backing him in the Senate to try and block or at least moderate proposed laws between these two guys. And yeah, you could see him as kind of a large cog in the system and someone that, maybe Cato could even use as a tool to get things done and stuff. If Cato would ever get his hands dirty, which he would not. He can't go against his virtues, except at the end of his life when he kind of did go against those virtues, and you could see it as a way that he doomed himself. But yeah,
Yeah, thanks for that introduction. And I'm going to be mocking Bibulus a little bit more when we get into the details of this episode's yeah. Now, let's get back to sharing. Now, let's get back to our triumvirs. Now, officially on the elections in Rome happened in the middle of the previous year. So it's usually around July and August where the elections will take place. So this would be in the July and August of the year 60 BC. And Caesar was running on a joint ticket with Lucius Licinius. He is just a rich senator, slightly conservative in his leanings, not wanting radical political reform and such like what Caesar and the populares want. But it was a dual strategy by Caesar. One, this guy's rich. He's going to pay the bribe so that the first centuries of the equites and patricians are going to vote for them so that they become the consuls. And the second was it was supposed to be an olive branch to more influential conservative senators like Cicero because Lucius was a good friend of Cicero. So it's kind of like to show that, hey, I'm not going to be such an extremist like the Gracchi brothers. You can trust me.
yeah, I guess you should
So
just mention, because we didn't really talk about Cicero, but Cicero more or less really doesn't like Caesar.
he
He
doesn't,
he's
but he's
pragmatic, but he
pragmatic
doesn't like.
enough.
Yeah,
Yeah, he doesn't. But since he doesn't really play too much of a role in this year, I'm not really getting into his consulship, like his role here. But he has a lot of standing despite being a novus homo, a new man into the Senate, and someone with practically zero military experience. But he has earned a lot of respect in the Roman Senate. So the fact that he's now considered one of the most influential senators, it's actually a great testament to Cicero himself. Now, Caesar, in this joint election ticket, he was the guy who was going to rally the crowds and everything so that they show this popular support. When And Lucius was just supposed to ride the coattails and just get elected as the second consul and keep quiet for the rest of the year. Unfortunately, Bibulus took the second consulship. Caesar was elected first. Now, there are two things I'm going to talk about. When they realized Caesar won, or was going to win, the provinces that the sitting consuls are going to govern after their term was over is decided before they even are elected, so that there is no, political drudgery that takes place. And Cato engineers and talks about the state of decline of the nature and wildlife and state of rural Italy, and said, instead of giving these guys, our consuls, a province, let's give these guys, the job of restoring rural Italy. And because it was actually a legit concern, he gets a lot of support from the Senate, and Caesar was like, yeah, you're trying to screw me over. I'm not going to forget this. But right now he can't do anything. But you just keep in mind that this is what the consuls have to govern after their term in office. Now, what ends up happening is Caesar gets the most votes and is elected first. That means he is going to be the first sitting consul of the month. How it works is the Romans would alternate the power. So while the consuls have equal authority, in the first month, the leading consul who got the first votes, he just takes the lead. The other guy can still influence and do a lot of work, but the first one takes the lead. That guy has to follow. In the second month, that is February, the other consul takes over, and like that, and the first consul has to, follow his lead. Then in March, the first consul once again takes lead. So this alternating thing, the one the sitting consul who holds the leading authority is called as holding fasces. And the logo symbol of this fasces, as you can see on this man, is this wooden stick with the axe. This is carried by the lictors, the bodyguards of the magistrates, to symbolize that they have this legal authority. And I think at this time the consuls were given like 12 lictors, which is the most that you get. So it's just kind of like a statement, right? Because the questa will get like one, praetors I think got like six, aediles got like four. So having 12 lictors move before you as your bodyguards, it's kind of like a statement. Now Caesar used the time, right? He has about 5 months before he takes power and began to prepare. Now what he does is, when he takes command and lead in the Senate in January of 59 BC, he first of all gets scribes to post the minutes of the entire meeting and put it on display in the forum for the entire population to see. It's because he's going to be putting a lot of pressure. His first major legislation, which is the biggest thing that he's going to put, is the Lex Agraria, which is his land reform bill. And this was a issue that had been plaguing Roman output and the economy for 50, 60 years now. With the influx of slave labor, a lot of these rich guys and plantation owners bought out a lot of small farmers in Italy. Now these farmers and their families have nowhere to go, so they crowd into all the major cities like Rome, Capua, etc. And the plantations kind of are not very productive in terms of economic activity and revenue, and the land goes into a state of disuse. And not to mention, during the Third Servile War, a lot of the plantation slaves were the ones that really rallied against the Romans. Now we have a situation where the land output is reduced, and the number of people in the cities is increased. So you have overcrowding in the cities, which is a health and sanitation risk and economic risk, because you are going to be eligible for the bread dole of subsidized grain. So demand for food is going up, but the supply of food is going down. And I might add, Cato the Younger had a few years ago passed legislation that increased the grain dole given out to all Romans. So you can see this is an economic time bomb. Now, Caesar, in his Lex Agraria, decided that there will be a land commission set up. They will buy the land from these willing plantations and redistribute it to the urban poor via a lottery system. And these urban poor will then take over these small plots of lands and cultivate it for agriculture. And to kind of ensure more people leave the cities, it has to be married men with a with at least 3 to 4 children minimum. So at least if one guy goes, then you are talking about like 6 to 7 mouths leaving the city. And he just also tossed in that, okay, veterans are also eligible to apply regardless. Just as a stick to Pompey, because Pompey wants to resettle a lot of his veterans, and we're talking about tens of thousands of men. And to ensure like the plantations do not bite again, the law will literally say that these small farm holders cannot sell their land to anybody for 20 years. Now, the Senate was pretty pissed off about the costs. And they also felt like, Caesar's going to take a lot of control. So Caesar made two exemptions. He's not going to be one of the land commissioners who will be in charge of buying and distribution of the lands. And the area of Campania is exempt. Now, Campania is kind of southwestern Italy, just above the Boot, where the city of Capua is. It's a pretty rich land that is owned by the Senate. Now, Caesar goes and reads out the bill line by line. The months he had before taking office, he literally crafted this very meticulous bill. He goes line by line. He asks after every sentence that to the Senate, are you okay with this? Are you fine with this? Do you want me to put any changes? Little reasoned opposition um, came, and many senators also realized that they had been promising this before. So if they oppose this bill, it's political suicide for them. And some sources, probably like Suetonius says, his conciliatory tone is just basically like a cynical plot to roll over the senators. And just some others say he just wanted to do symbiotic relationship and such, so that they can work together. Now, it was all going well until a certain someone spoke up, Cato. He started to filibuster in arguing that the people would be too gracious to Caesar for bringing the bill, and that the current situation was fine. And this, like, he was talking about Caesar's consulship, and knowledge of Caesar's latest victories, blah blah blah. He just starts talking and talking and talking, saying, it's not, maybe we need to consider how much money, blah blah blah, right? He's just starting to filibuster. And Caesar sees through this, but makes a political mistake. He threatened to have Cato sent to jail, and had the men like the guards arrest him. Which, as sitting consul, it's not illegal. But this forceful tactic does not sit well with many senators, who quickly give in, and Caesar has Cato released. Now, he just decides that instead of getting the law passed by the Senate, he'll go to the people. Usually, the laws have to be passed by the Senate before it goes to the forum and displayed to the public for 24 days before it will be voted on. This is the rule. So Caesar needs to get this entire thing passed in the first month, in January of 59 BC alone. This is so that he can, once it's passed, he is going to be able to appoint the commissioners. They're going to be answerable to him. If it delays off and goes into February, Bibulus will control it and will put the conservative bloc, the optimates, in the land commissioner, or just reject the proposal altogether. Which, mind you, Bibulus had openly told Caesar that I'm going to just oppose it just because I don't like it. Now, what he did, he bypassed the Senate altogether. It's not usually done, but there was a quirk that made sure it wasn't exactly a illegal move, and he had it displayed, so that we are talking about the 25th or 26th of January, there will be a vote. And over the next few days, he would be speaking to the general public, talking about this bill, debating its merits, and drumming up support for them. Now, he then summoned a meeting wherein a magistrate would address the people, a contio, and he requested Bibulus to come and explain his opposition to the bill. When Bibulus doesn't really give any articulate objections beyond that, he would not permit any innovation. Caesar pled with him before the people, and Bibulus, in frustration, says, "You will not have this law this year, not even should you all want it." Now, this is going to turn the masses against Bibulus. Keep in mind, that's pretty important. Then It is at this moment the triumvirate starts to show its public face, because Pompey and Crassus come in and speak in support for the bill. They're like, "Yeah, this is a great idea. I really love this." And you know, Pompey was asked what would he do if opponents want to use violence to pass, stop this law being passed. He said he would provide a shield if anyone dared raise a sword in opposition. So this is pretty big. Now, Bibulus was, booed off and was humiliated. At the end of the 24th day, at the forum, the vote takes place. So this is where they would be voting for this bill, even though this is an image of Gaius Gracchus back, many decades ago. And Caesar has got the crowd. He's worked his magic. Pompey and Crassus are there, right? Bibulus arrives with Cato and supportive senators and three tribunes of the plebe. Now, this is very important because the tribunes of the plebe and the sitting consuls have a veto power on any law that goes on. And this is exactly what they've come to do. They are going to veto the proceedings. And it is at this point when Bibulus was going forward to the speaking platform to exercise his veto. The crowd kind of like, already, a lot of tense, nervous energy attack him. People actually Bibulus thought he was going to die when his bodyguards got overpowered and they broke his fasces, his saying that they don't recognize, which is a symbolism of not recognizing his authority. And in the ultimate humiliation to the guy, they literally dumped feces on him right there. Yeah, he became a shithead, literally.
Yeah, that's a classic move.
Yeah, and the conservative bloc was completely taken aback by this, and they asked Bibulus to retreat with them to a different temple to rally, but the vote passed, and you know Caesar was able to appoint his land commissioners. Do you want to guess two names that were at the top of the 20-man list?
I would imagine they rhyme with Crassus and Pompey.
Exactly. So this is strike one for Caesar.
Hmm.
Now Bibulus would also claim, now the next month Bibulus takes over. All right. He holds fasces, right? As I mentioned, he's now the lead consul for the month. He first calls a meeting to literally condemn Caesar for the use of mob violence. The bare minimum was like this entire law has to be overturned, and they need to even talk about expelling Caesar from the consulship, right, for the use of such law. Now, this is where Roman tradition and legacy plays against the conservative law. Bibulus, holding fasces as a sitting consul, speaks first in his accusation and condemnation of Caesar. Caesar, as a second sitting consul, speaks in his defense. After that, only former consuls will speak first. Two of them are Pompey and Crassus. Both of them speak in open support for Caesar, saying the vote is fine, the vote was legal, you can't do anything about it. And this silences the Senate. Because not only Caesar has the love of the people, he also has the backing of the most powerful general and the two richest guys in Rome, pretty much. So the opposition to Caesar died, and Cato could not speak because he's only a praetor. So there are many more consuls like Cicero, Lucullus, etc., who were yet to speak, and no one dared oppose it. And Bibulus would retreat from public life for the rest of the year, and he would just be calling omens on the days Caesar would call in any bill to be passed, which was legal. Consuls had the capability to declare public and religious holidays to some degree, which unfortunately for Bibulus, Caesar was the Pontifex Maximus, head priest. So if the head priest says that, yeah, this is not a holiday, who are you to argue with him? And every time Bibulus would actually, issue complaints against Caesar and Pompey, supporters of these guys would attack Bibulus's house. But yeah, he just became an entire joke for the rest of the year. That it is why like historians call this the year of Julius and Caesar, since it's usually the year of consul 1 and consul 2, but we don't have a second consul now. And now Caesar starts to pay back his his two key allies. First of all, Pompey's treaties and reorganization in the east were ratified. So all the people he established, as you said, relationships with in the east, everything was ratified, approved. So all the kingdoms that were now friends of Rome became friends. And Asia Minor, Levant, the Seleucid realm were all reorganized into different provinces. Judea, Syria were all added. Asia was enlarged, and Bithynia and Pontus were added as new provinces. And beyond the Roman realm, he created client kingdoms which were to act as buffer states to one of the biggest enemies the Romans would ever face, the Parthians. And now that these treaties were ratified, Pompey would also be given the money to resettle his veterans, because after you serve for the term as a Roman legionary, you are going to be given you know a land in a new area to retire and just become a farmer again. Pompey was not able to get that ratified. It was also done, and it was actually at this moment when Lucullus opposed Pompey getting all the credit, because Lucullus also played a key part in the Third Mithridatic War, a former consul. And if you play the game Expeditions Rome, he is kind of like your patron in that game at the start. And Lucullus was a pretty good general himself. He was the battle victor at the Battle of Tigranokratia, where he destroyed the Armenian army with that was twice his size with minimal casualties. When he tried to oppose Pompey's eastern settlements, right? Caesar kind of just suggested, I'm going to threaten you with prosecution and bring up past crimes. And it, according to Livy, it resulted in forced public humiliation of Lucullus begging on his knees for mercy to Caesar. It also was a kind of low point for Caesar, because now the senatorial mood against him, despite him having control, is going down. And he then, so now that he's repaid Pompey, he now repays Crassus. As I mentioned, the tax collectors overbid and no one was willing to give them the tax relief on the amount that was due. And Caesar reduces that requirement by a third. No one was particularly happy, but okay, it's passed. He's now repaid his obligations to, his fellow triumvirs. And this is now where Caesar now does something else. He proposes now the two next laws, a second land reform bill. Right after passing a major land reform bill, he attacks Campania, which, as I mentioned, was exempt from the previous land bill, saying there's enough land there for 20,000 small farmers. And since the Senate already owns the land, we don't have to buy it from anyone. So it's not a big economic output. A lot of senators opposed it, but no one really spoke up against it. And Caesar actually even bribed Cicero, who was a big opponent of his second land reform, by saying, Cicero, I'll make you a legate in one of my legions. And Cicero was not moved by the bribe, which it's a pretty big thing to be a legate, because Roman military prestige mattered a lot, and Cicero never had much military accomplishments. Caesar also maneuvered at this time, just before this bill, for the governorships. Remember when I mentioned they sabotage Caesar, that saying he's not going to get any proconsular governorship, he's going to be restoring the land in Italy? Caesar did not want that, because why not? Governorship is how you guys are going to make a lot of your money. He got his allies to propose that he be given the provinces of Illyria and Cisalpine Gaul. So this is just where, if you were to put it on today's map, where the province of Illyria was, which is on the frontier, because areas beyond that were not in Roman control, and Cisalpine Gaul. So two adjacent provinces were given to him, all bordering non-Roman territory. And it was also at that moment news came in that the senator of Transalpine Gaul, as you can see here, that governor has died. So Caesar is to be given all three provinces, despite objections from Cato and the other optimates, for an unprecedented 5 years. It was never done, but people kind of agreed, because they thought, all right, we give Caesar what he wants. he'll get out of our lives. We don't have to bother, and everything is going to go back to normal. And the legions that were assigned to the provinces, the 7th, 8th, 9th, and the 10th, the veterans who have already served with Caesar. So he's getting a ready force to begin his military ascent. And he also got the nice ability that he gets to choose his own legates. Usually, the Senate would choose the legates to kind of counterbalance the inequality or the power of a governor. Caesar got to do that. So, this is where that bill was passed for Caesar's pro-consulship. Now, there are two more things that I'll be talking about. One is with Ptolemy the 12th. Ptolemy the 11th, the previous king of Pharaoh of Egypt, had died and had in his will said, I'm giving my entire realm to the Roman Republic. Now, Ptolemy the 12th, who was an illegitimate heir, he comes to Rome begging for assistance from Caesar and Pompey. And he comes in the year 60 to 59 BC, and he meets with Pompey and Caesar. And these guys had, they agree and take his cause up. They, recognize that Ptolemy the 12th is now the Pharaoh of Egypt. There is a formal alliance and friendship tossed in. And, you know, they'll respect this. And there was also the fact that Ptolemy paid a pretty big bribe to Caesar and Pompey, which was equivalent to 6,000 talents, the entire annual revenue of Egypt. It's a pretty king's ransom. And just for some context, when Carthage lost the first Punic War, their indemnity was 3,200 talents. So it was a king's ransom that these guys got. The last bill that he puts forward was the Lex Julia de Reputandis, or the Julian Law on Corruption. And this was a bill, Craig, believe it or not, Cato backed and supported, because this was a code of conduct for how magistrates have to behave, accounting practices to avoid corruption, and the reform the way they run the provinces and reduce bribe taking, and scope for officials to kind of misuse their power. And this was for every public official within that province, and a lot of people had been trying to get such a law passed, and Caesar managed to do so. And Cato, because he genuinely believed this, as you said, right, he lived and breathed his morals. So he did not oppose it at all. And a lot of his conservative supporters had to also back it up, because they had also kind of championed themselves as, anti-corruption guys. So opposing a bill that is fighting against corruption would look pretty bad for you. Now, this is, it also, this law, I might add, it did not just extend to the magistrates, but even their family members if they came to the province. So it was pretty comprehensive and continued to be a standard and base for administrative laws for many decades to come after Caesar. So it was a pretty good message and such. Now, that is pretty much the end of the main laws and events that were passed. And Caesar oversees the elections in October, not July, because a certain Bibulus just kind of kept declaring omens for postponing the elections. Now, I don't know why that guy would do it, because it's not like he's gaining any strategic benefit as well. Like when Cato filibustered, there was a strategic benefit in a way, right, to his faction and stifling Caesar. Bibulus doing it, well, yeah, I don't think the guy really thought through why. But in October of 59 BC, there are two new consuls that are, elected to the post. One is Caesar's soon-to-be father-in-law, Lucius Calpurnius Piso, and the other was Aulus Galbinus, who was a legate of Pompey. Now, even though Pompey and Crassus had kind of distanced themselves a little bit from Caesar because of his antics, the triumph, they kind of like owed each other. So, he was secured for now. End of the year, before leaving office and going up to the north to start his eventual Gallic wars, the departing consuls give a speech. Caesar gives a speech. We don't have any records, but it's probably like, yes, I did my duty, I'm proud, I'm happy, I did like, I'm sure you guys are happy, please give me feedback or whatnot. And Bibulus actually appears at this moment for the first time in almost a year into public. And he wants to present himself, and he takes the oath of trying to declare that he did his duty and such. And he was then about to justify his actions as consul and opposition to Caesar when a tribune of the plebs used his veto and told Bibulus, you can't speak. And Bibulus was not allowed to speak. And
That's pretty
do you want to
funny.
know the name of this tribune of the plebs who did this? Publius Claudius Pulcher.
Yeah, the
The
other
same
guy that
guy
was,
who
yeah.
Bona Dea writes and snuck in as a woman to see the senatorial women of Rome
Well,
in
Julius
their
Caesar and
festival.
him have an interesting relationship. They're very similar in how they were like these kind of, what would you call it?
Caesar
Hipsters, I
was,
guess.
yeah, Caesar was the only man at that time in that entire Bona Dea festival, like where it was being taken. But at that time, when Pulcher did infiltrate, Caesar was uh the Pontifex
Pontus
Maximus,
Max,
so
yeah.
you can make a case for Caesar to be there. You can't even question it, actually. But yeah, this is the end of Caesar's first year as consul. Pretty eventful, pretty exciting, if you ask me. Even though the latter half was pretty quiet, but the first few months more than compensated, and the build up. And Caesar now departs. He has 5 years of proconsular imperium. He has 4 veteran legions, which are soon gonna be 8 within a year.
It's
And the
basically the
Gallic
basis.
Wars and Caesar's rise to military glory are just beginning. But that is it on what I want to talk about Caesar's first year as a consul. Greg, thanks for letting me take you hostage this time for a change.
Of course. For once, a non military episode. And before I let the audience go, again, if you're not checking us out on YouTube, please do so. We put up a lot of maps for help with the geography, our portraits of all the key characters, and sometimes clips. And if you'd like to further support the channel, consider checking out the YouTube membership at the Pacific War channel on YouTube, or my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War channel. By joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, which is 36 episodes and ongoing, I think now. Early access to all the content I make, and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. Until next time, over and out.